All right, guys, what's happening? What's happening? Good morning to you. It is Wednesday, March 17th. It's St. Patty's Day. Happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. This morning, we're going to talk about let me teach you versus let me sell you. Let's get started.
It is ultimately important for you to look at your goals, truly what you want to do in your life, and then look at the people who you spend the most time with in your life and figure out if that lines up.
What's happening, guys? Good morning to you and happy Wednesday. This morning, I wanted to dig into a topic that I was reminded of last week at the conference that I was at, and that is the importance of teaching, of providing information, providing a blueprint to people on how they can kind of grow themselves, grow their businesses, guiding them down the right path without necessarily even having to sell anybody. You know, like when you think about the information that you gather at these types of events, these types of conferences, you always go back and think about those people that were great educators in those moments, right? They were people that shared their knowledge and shared their expertise with you, and they taught you something, right? That you walked away with tangible information that you really wanted to implement into your life. And what is very interesting is how attracted you are to those people that teach automatically, right? And how there is really not even much of a need for you to be attracted to want to do business with those people as a result of what they're teaching you. And so I wanted to dig into that this morning and give you guys some perspective on kind of, how that works. Like when you teach people, it kind of takes away the need to have to sell people, right? So, and I want to talk about how that ties into business, how when we educate and teach our teams and our staff, how it stops us from having to necessarily sell them on an idea if we are good enough educators and we can lead them down the right path of really understanding where we're coming from. It takes all the selling kind of out of the equation. But first, I want to say good morning to some folks. We got a bunch of people on here this morning. Good morning, Trudy, Scott, Dean, Sharon Falk, Lydia, Carla, John Rugg, Christina. Good morning to you. Jared, Rick, Ryan Austin, what's happening, guys? Thank you guys for being here. So, what is really the difference between being taught and being sold? I think that, naturally, and Myron Golden actually talked about this at the conference. He talked about how people say they don't like to be sold. And the reality is that people do like to be sold. It's the nature of how we look at the word sales or the word sold is kind of has a negative connotation, doesn't it? But everybody enjoys being taught, right? People place tremendous value on being taught things. It's one of the top things that really attracts people to each other is the ability to gather information from each other, especially in the business world, right? But even in life, right? Aren't we naturally attracted to those people that can provide us information that maybe we don't have? Those people that are a little bit more experienced in certain areas of life than maybe we are. And so our ability to be taught or want to be taught really drives us to shape the circle of people that we are surrounded by, right? And so it is typical that when someone is teaching you something that you are naturally more attracted to them. There is an emotional draw to that person. And so it is said that when you are teaching someone that you unlock a real emotional trigger inside of someone that allows that ability for someone to make a decision. It actually is part of how people make buying decisions in business. It's a really important piece of how people decide who they're going to do business with. And so it creates a tremendous amount of loyalty and comfort and motivation to buy from you when you are naturally a teacher, right? When you're providing information to people, it makes it very easy for people to unlock that emotional trigger and the logical trigger that ultimately triggers someone to buy something. And so I want you to think about that, the difference between quote unquote selling someone and teaching someone is similar but very different, right? The art of selling really requires a bit of persuasion, and sometimes for a lot of people, the way that they sell, it comes down to a little bit of convincing. And Myron Golden actually talked about those two things. And persuasion is more using information that exists to kind of create those emotional triggers or those emotional unlocks that it takes for someone to decide to do business with you, where convincing is kind of pushing or causing someone to believe. So you are convincing, you are changing their mind, you are convincing them of something, versus persuasion is a bit of talking through something with someone and really allowing them to see something that they probably already believed. And so I believe that the art of persuasion is a little bit more in alignment with teaching, right? Where convincing is probably more in alignment with the word selling, right? And so when you think about those two things, I think that all of us have probably been in a situation where we've experienced being sold or someone trying to convince us of something. For me, there's always a story that comes to mind, and that is going to a car dealership where I was trying to buy a vehicle, and the salesperson was trying to sell me something before they even qualified me to understand exactly what it was that I wanted. And so that person was trying to convince me to purchase a vehicle, versus if they asked me a lot of questions and they actually understood who I was, what I was buying, why I was buying it, they could have probably persuaded me based on my own needs to be able to purchase something that I actually needed and wanted, right? So I want you to think about that when you are a person that holds a lot of knowledge. Good morning, Daniel. What's happening, brother? When you are a person that holds a lot of knowledge, you have the ability to teach someone that knowledge, to help them understand something, which leads to persuading them into something that they may need that you are able to provide them, right? So there's a bit of a difference there between the typical definition that people consider being sold versus the art of being taught and persuaded into something. And so the idea of persuasion is to provide someone something and to explain it to them in a way that allows them to make the decision, that makes them have the ability to realize that they need it. And so I tend to lean towards that as the connection to how I teach, right? It is really understanding the person that you're talking to, really understanding maybe the audience that you're in front of, and teaching them in a way that leads to them almost persuading themselves, right? You are delivering a message, but they are persuading themselves in the direction of understanding why they need to take action on something, why they need to do something. And so by transferring that information, by transferring that knowledge, by teaching them, you are able to lead them down the right path. Versus typically when someone feels like they are being sold on something, they tend to get a little bit more nervous, or they tend to be a little more uncertain because the lack of knowledge that's being transferred isn't necessarily there. And so I am speaking of this more from the position of how people view being sold, as opposed to really what the real definition of being sold is, right? People should enjoy being sold something as long as it's something that they need and it's something of value. But the reality is that teaching is a way better approach to helping someone understand what it is that they need. It takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit lengthier of a process. But when you teach somebody something, you exchange the knowledge that you have to help them understand their own needs. It is really guiding someone in the right direction towards something that eventually, as you continue to teach, as you continue to share the knowledge, and you continue to pull back the curtain as to why they need something, that teaching that you are doing will eventually lead them to the right place. And when they get to that place, they're going to be completely certain of what it is that they need and why they need it because of your ability to explain it. That is, again, also going back to the word persuasion, it is the ability to persuade is a very powerful thing. And if it's put in the wrong hands, it can be a very negative thing, right? The art of persuasion is a very tricky thing. If you teach somebody how to persuade in the wrong, like you teach somebody that has the wrong values how to persuade people the right way, then it can lead to a very destructive situation, right? And so when we think about the idea of being taught versus being sold, I want you guys to really create a line between those two and take that position of being a teacher, right? Of really explaining to people and educating them on why they need something. And that, guys, is how actually the word sales really gets a better definition over a period of time, right? By educating, by teaching, by providing knowledge, and using the art of persuasion to help people understand what it is they need and why they need it. That is the very best way to approach selling anything, right? And so when people think of being sold something, they think of a very negative connotation because most people are doing more convincing than they are doing educating. And so I want you guys to think about that as if you're in sales, if you're in business, the art of education is such a critical piece of selling anything, right? And so most of the time when you feel that negative pull towards being sold, it's because someone has not taken the time to actually educate you on what it is that they are trying to provide you as a service and or sell you. Hopefully that makes sense. Everybody has experienced the negative interaction when it comes to sales. Everyone has probably also experienced a really great interaction with someone when it comes to being sold something. And the difference between those two is literally the difference between being educated and someone taking the time to ask you questions and providing a solution that is really customized to you, right? It is really presented to you in a way that persuades you based on your own values, your own needs, your own desires, versus someone trying to convince you based on their own wants and their own needs and their own drive to get you to do something that you may not understand or you may not want to do or you may not need in the first place. So think about that. What is the difference between teaching and selling? Scott just said in the comments here, your extended car warranty people are the worst, man. I don't know how those people get our phone numbers, but I get several of those calls a day myself. It's pretty crazy, right? And so it's this idea of creating a culture of education, creating a culture of teaching versus creating a culture of selling in a negative way or convincing people. And so I hope you guys understand kind of the difference between those two. Hopefully this gives you some perspective on the difference between teaching and selling. And those two really can work very well hand in hand together if they are used in the right way. And so I don't want you guys to have a negative opinion of the word selling necessarily, but I want you to understand the difference of why people view them so differently and why people say, well, nobody likes to be sold. That's not necessarily true. It is they don't like to be convinced. They like to be persuaded based on their own needs. Most of the time, people don't grab the knowledge and they don't try to educate. So they are doing far more convincing than they are doing persuading. That's all I got for you this morning, guys. I hope it was insightful for you. I hope it was helpful, and I hope that it gives you some ability to go into today and spend a lot more time trying to teach people, trying to educate people, trying to provide people with the knowledge that they need to almost be able to make those decisions themselves, right? That is really the art of persuasion, is to give people so much information that it makes that decision super easy to make, and it makes you very certain about what it is that you're doing. Great information that I pulled out of the conference that we were at, and I wanted to share it with you this morning. I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome Wednesday and a great rest of your week. I will see you tomorrow morning, same place, same time, right here on Morning Perspective. Love you guys. Thanks for being here.